Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and before we start talking about how we can create a new story for ourselves, I do just want to say that a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to these podcasts would be a huge help for me. And I'd also appreciate it if you subscribed and liked this video on YouTube and left a comment as well. Today, I want to talk about how we can create a new story for ourselves. This is something I've been doing a lot for myself lately. And this is one of those moments where it's going to take a lot of time, because we're also having to unravel the old stories that we have been telling ourselves for years. I think about so many conversations I've had with clients, with friends and family. I think about a lot of things that I've seen on the news and how even in many podcasts that I listen to, there is this wide range of stories that we tell ourselves, and we can start to change what those stories actually are. And I do want to preface this here and recognize that this is coming from the perspective of a white, cisgendered, straight man here in the United States. And so there are certain dynamics of your story that are going to be very different from mine, because if you're a person of color, if you are today, if you're in the wrong political party, quote, wrong political party, then there's going to be a lot of influences and, not just influences, but there's going to be a lot of authority coming from others that are going to manipulate your story. And so I do want to just share these thoughts that I have on this day. I am absolutely exhausted. I am tired, but this time for a very good reason. And in fact, Odin is behind me on the couch, and he is exhausted in his own way, again, for good reasons. And this was just something that came up to my mind this morning, so let's talk about it. I think about how many individuals today have a mindset, especially here in Western societies, of a finite perspective of the world and the universe. There's only so much money to go around. There's only so many resources. And if we have that kind of a mindset, if that is the story that we are telling ourselves, then we're going to interact with the world as if we have to get our share. We have to fight. We have to strive. We have to do everything that we need to in order to make sure that we get what is due to us, even if that means taking it from someone else. That is a story that many Americans believe. That is a story that many people in industrialized Western societies are telling themselves. Now, whether or not that is true, that's not for me to say. I will leave that to greater minds to determine whether or not that is the truth. And I also think of a very old mindset that I had in my Christian days, and that is that I was at war. Individuals who are Christians believe that they are in some kind of a spiritual warfare. And so if that is the story that you're telling yourself, that there is some in some ways, all-powerful, evil entity that is trying to ruin your life, trying to take you down, trying to bring you to hell, and you need to fight against him and all of his minions of the underworld, then that is how you're going to navigate the world. You're going to look for opposition. You're going to look for moments when it feels like you are powerless and therefore there is something attacking you. You're going to look at the world through a lens of good and evil, and it's going to be very black and white in that kind of world. That story really lends itself to just a black and white narrative of our world and our society. So this really got me thinking, especially this morning as I am pondering what was going on over this last weekend. The story that we tell ourselves really has an impact on our story as a whole. So if we want to change what our story is, a good place to start is look at the story that you are currently telling yourself. I, having grown up in the United States, where I started working when I was about 14 years old. That was when I had my first paper route. And I have effectively held a job ever since I was 14. And I'm 41 now. That's what, 27 years? Yeah, 27 years I have been working. And I have grown up with these messages that there is only so much money to go around. I have to work. I have to put in the time. I have to put in the effort. I have to do everything I can in order to get my fair share so that when it comes retirement time, I can disconnect, unplug, I can leave the workforce, and then I can start having fun. I can start doing all of the things that I would like to do, see all the places I'd like to see. Well, this last weekend, Libby and I took a train trip to Portland, Oregon. Now, I've been to Portland before. Usually I will drive there. Occasionally I will have the odd layover as I'm flying from wherever it is to Seattle back to home. And yet, this was the first time that I can recall taking a train. We went with our friends John and Dan. These two are train aficionados. In fact, these are the two people who introduced Libby and I to the game Satisfactory. And a big thing that you can do in this game is you can create rails that will transport materials and goods all around the map. And when we were playing a 4-player game, as soon as the rails were unlocked, John and Dan were working to create rail lines. And it's something that they're very passionate about. As soon as Libby and I got on this Amtrak, Libby made this comment because we sit down, we find 2 seats, we sit down, put all of our luggage overhead, and then she looks at how there is so much legroom and there's even like footrests. And as soon as the train got going, John and Dan took us to the observation car, and we spent most of our time in the observation car just watching the scenery, talking, playing games. It was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. I tried something new, and I went to a place that I've been before. And the last time that I went to Portland, Libby and I, well, the last time I stayed in Portland for a time, Libby and I went to see one of her college friends. I remember spending so much time just tense and full of anxiety because we were wandering around downtown, and Portland has a reputation. It is a very beautiful place. Don't get me wrong on that. And yet, we also walked by some tent communities where homeless people will gather together and have tents, and it is their place. They are very protective of their place. And I felt like I really needed to, being the only man in the group, I felt like I really needed to be watchful and that there were threats all around me, and I had to observe, I had to watch, I had to do everything I could to protect Libby and her friend. This trip, with a years wide gap between this one and the previous one, it was a much, much different experience. I am older. I am more experienced. I still held some tension while we were wandering around. And yet, I wasn't afraid of some of the homeless people that we walked by. I was not afraid when homeless people came on the bus system or the other forms of transit that we were taking. I was telling myself a very different story. And that story was, these people were not threats. These people were not out to get me. They're not out to rob me. And that isn't to say that there aren't those people that do this. Again, if that is the story you're telling yourself, though, that's how you're going to interact with the world. I was still cautious, but I had a much, much better experience. And a lot of it came down to the story that I was telling myself. We walked, oh gosh, we probably walked over 10 miles over 2 days while we were in Portland. We walked, we talked, we laughed, we joked, we enjoyed food and fellowship, we shopped. I went to Powell's for the first time that I can ever recall. Whew, man, that is going to be a place that we go to pretty much every single time. And one of the fun things about this experience, besides the fact that I was able to try something new, is that this is going to turn into a new tradition where we want to get together and do this train trip every year, the four of us. It was such a fun experience, and it could have been a much different experience if I was telling myself something else. If I still held on to this mindset that there were people out to get me, that I had to look out for all of the bad people, instead of looking at people as individuals who are just trying to get through life, individuals who have their hang-ups, individuals who are working through this crazy thing that we call life the best that they can. And there are some people that are in terrible places, and I'm curious what kind of a story they're telling themselves. There are individuals who are telling themselves these stories that the system is failing them, and that is 100% true. There are people where the system is failing them. That is where I do not see many things with my white privilege. the system was made for someone like me. And that is why I'm trying to be very careful in how I say this, because this is not the end all be all cure all for what ails you. This is not going to be the 10-step process of how to improve your life so that you can start making the money that you want to make just by changing your outlook and changing your perspective, and look at the world from, instead of a finite mindset, look at it from a perspective of an infinite source. There are some people that cannot have what I have without having the privilege that I do. At the same time, I do want to encourage you to clue in to what are the stories that you are telling yourself. Are you an individual who, let's get into politics here. Are you an individual who's Democratic or Republican, who looks at the opposing side as if they have all of the wrong mindsets and they are a blight or an ill upon society, and therefore they are an enemy? They are in this trench over here, I'm in this trench, and therefore we need to fire at each other. Or are you an individual who, still in politics, recognizes that there are good values on all sides of the political spectrum? That these people who are trying to make these laws or overturn laws, they are individuals who are trying to do the best that they can with what they have. However, does that define everyone in politics? Of course not. There are some people that are going to get their hands on these positions of power, and they're going to do everything that they can in order to sustain the power and get what they can with the time that they have. But that isn't everyone. If we put these blanket stories over everyone who is in the opposition of what we believe, then we're going to miss out on some great people who we can have great discussions with, who can challenge us and who we can challenge. And a big part of that is going to be to stop telling ourselves that story, that these people are enemies, that these people are wrong. And this is something I'm trying to remind myself about, considering a lot of the political stories that I keep hearing, considering how I have not been shy about my disdain for what's been happening in American society today. I cannot take this story of what a lot of these far-right Republicans are doing and use that as a broad stroke to paint every single person that I come across who is Republican. That's going to give me a very incorrect view of the world. And I can miss out on some great, wonderful people who are trying to do everything that they can to change the world for the better. What are the stories that you are telling yourself? And once you know what those stories are, you can start to change them. This comes down to what you are saying to yourself. If you look at the world, do you come at it from the perspective that there isn't a lot to go around? That scarcity mindset is going to make you look at people and situations in a way of, what can I get out of it? How can I get my fair share? If you look at the world and you tell a story of how there are evil powers that are at play and evil people who are pushing to make these evil plans come to fruition, then you're going to be looking for enemies. You're going to be looking for those who are going to do something that you don't agree with. And you're going to miss out on all of the good that many, many of these people can have. Try changing your story just for a week and see how that starts to change your perspective. Again, this is not going to be a grand change that takes place in the span of 5 days. And you might be one of those people that this might be too much for you to start with. So just start to notice, what is it that I am telling myself? What is my story? Once you know what the story is that you're telling yourself, how can you change it? How can you change it to have a much more expansive, compassionate worldview? How can you change it to start noticing the good in others instead of only observing and recognizing what's bad about them? And again, there are bad people out there, and there are a lot of good people. But if we only stick to those camps, that there are just bad people and there are just good people, then there's not going to be much change that we see in the world. And this sounds kind of odd for me to say, considering I'm talking about how to be the heroes in our stories. Because to be the heroes, then that kind of implies that there is a villain that we need to bring down. And maybe that villain isn't another person. What if that villain just happens to be a story? Happens to be a memory? Happens to be something from our past that is trying to dictate how we need to live our lives? Maybe the villain is an ideology. I hope these ponderings have been insightful. I'm still trying to understand myself, what is going on within me. Some of these changes. And I am noticing that the more I change my story, the better my life has become. As I look through the world differently than I used to, I have found so much more love and acceptance from a great many people that I used to think that there was no good value in them whatsoever. Individuals who are homosexual when I grew up Christian. Individuals who are unhoused. They were just a blight on society. Now I see them as people. People who have their own stories. There is a reason why I start every podcast saying that we are working to unravel the self-limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. Because those beliefs that we have that are limiting us, they are the stories that we are telling ourselves and that were told to us growing up. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend or wonderful week Depends on when you're listening to this. And just know that you can change your story. You really can. A lot of that comes down to just what is being said and done between your ears. And even the smallest change, just like these small rudders that are used to change the course of gigantic water vessels. You don't need something large and grand in order to make these changes. It can just be something small. Maybe it even appears as if it's insignificant. Yet that can change our trajectory and that can change our destiny. And just like those huge freighters that are trying to turn around in open waters, it's something that's going to take some time. So give yourself the time. Be gracious to yourself. Be compassionate. Know that you are loved, and know that we need you no matter what. And until next time, live strong for today.